Welcome. This webcast is about a shift that is already underway, but still under discussed in many corporate development conversations. The topic itself is simple to state, but very difficult to execute. Corporate development is becoming an AI value creation function. Historically, corporate development has been understood as the function that sources deals, builds valuation models, negotiates terms, manages diligence, and gets the transaction closed. However, that definition is no longer wrong, but it is incomplete. In the artificial intelligence era, corporate development must do more than ask, can we buy this company at the right price? It now has to ask, can we trust the data? Can we verify the AI capability or capabilities? Can we integrate the workflow? Can we govern the model? Can we retain the talent? Can we scale the operating model? And can we prove value after close? That is a very different job. And it is why the next generation of corporate development will not be judged by the transaction announcement. It will be judged by whether the paid premium becomes realized enterprise value. And this is not an AI explainer. I'm not here to define machine learning or generative AI or agentic AI in abstract terms. This is a deal judgment conversation. It is about how capital, data, governance, operating model design, and executive judgment now have to move together. Across these three sessions, we will cover the full arc. In session one, we will explain why the deal thesis has changed. And in session two, we will walk through the artificial intelligence diligence stack and what corporate development now has to underwrite. And in session three, we will move from integration planning to value capture because that is where artificial intelligence deal value is ultimately made or destroyed. And the controlling idea is this: the premium is paid at close, but it is earned after close. Let's dive in. Welcome to session one, the deal thesis. Why corporate development has changed. The central question for this session is this: why does AI change what corporate development is actually buying? That question, it matters. It matters because the target is not always the real asset. Sometimes the real asset is the data inside the target. Sometimes it is the workflow position. Sometimes the real asset is the model behavior. Sometimes it is the governance layer. Sometimes the real asset is the engineering team. And sometimes it is the customer usage pattern that creates a feedback loop. And sometimes the real asset, it's the operating system that the acquirer can build after close. That is the shift. Corporate development used to buy companies, and increasingly it buys systems of value. And if you do not know which system of value you are buying, the valuation model, it can look precise while the investment thesis is still vague. Development used to be transaction led. AI makes it value led. Let's start with the traditional model. Corporate development has historically been organized around a transaction sequence. Identify the target, build a model, assess strategic fit, then run diligence. After that, negotiate terms, close the transaction. That's the sequence. Then the asset moves into integration. That model works reasonably well when the primary value drivers are scale, market access, cost synergy, customer overlap, product adjacency, or geographic expansion. But AI changes the nature of the asset. Artificial intelligence enabled value does not sit neatly inside a revenue line, a cost synergy estimate, or even a product roadmap. It often sits in the relationship between several things: data quality, data rights, model performance, workflow adoption, compute economics, customer trust, talent retention, governance maturity, and the acquirer's ability to absorb the target without damaging the very capability it paid for. That is why that is why corporate development is becoming less of a transaction function and more of a value creation function. Historically, or the old question was, is this asset strategically adjacent, financially attractive, and executable? The AI era question is this: can this asset improve our ability to control data, workflows, decisioning, and value creation in a way that we can actually operate after close? That is a much richer question. It also requires a different kind of executive judgment. Right now, the timing matters. AI is no longer a thematic overlay in mergers and acquisitions. It is becoming a structural deal variable. The source material for this webcast points to the same conclusion across multiple research files. Corporate development is no longer about sourcing or valuation or negotiation closing. It now it now has to evaluate data assets, AI capability, integration complexity, platform economics, workflow adoption, governance risk, and even post-close value capture. The market is paying for AI capability. But here is the danger: not all AI capability is durable. Some companies have proprietary data, domain specific workflows, real customer adoption, repeatable model performance, and governance maturity. Others have a thin application layer on top of a third party model, a few impressive demos, weak data rights, and no real path to post close sale. Those two companies, they may both call themselves AI enabled. Corporate development has to know the difference. And that is why the role is changing. The market is moving capital towards artificial intelligence, data, and platform assets. But the value of those assets depends on whether the buyer can operationalize them. So corporate development, it now has to sit at the intersection of investment thesis, technical verification, operating model design, and post close accountability. That is the new lane. Now, let's introduce a practical vocabulary. There are 5 AI era deal vectors that corporate teams really need to understand. These are not the only possible deal rationales, but they are the 5 that matter most for this conversation. First, vector 1: data moat acquisition. The first vector is data moat acquisition. Here, the buyer is not primarily buying revenue, it's buying data that competitors cannot easily replicate. That data may be proprietary, labeled domain specific behavior, rich, or continuously refreshed. The question is not simply how much data does the company have? The better question is this: is this data investable? By investable, I mean, is it clean enough to use? Is it legally usable? Is it traceable? Traceability, right? Is it connected to an economic decision? Does it refresh over time? Can it improve a model or workflow? Can it create a competitive advantage when combined with our platform? A company can have a large data estate and still have a weak AI asset. Volume is not the same as value. The value is in the combination of rights, quality, context, governance, and economic actionability. So when a corporate development team looks at a data rich target, it should ask, what decision does this data improve? What workflow does it change? What model does it strengthen? What value can only be captured by owning or controlling this data? That is data moat logic. And there's vector two, model leverage. Here, the buyer is acquiring trained models, fine tuning pipelines, model behavior, engineering routines, evaluation assets, or technical capability that compresses time to market. This is not just about buying code, it's about buying learning. A model that has been trained, tested, tuned, and embedded in real workflows may represent months or years of accumulated capability. So the question becomes, would it take us 12 to 24 months to build this organically? Would we need scarce talent that we cannot recruit quickly? Would we need data that we do not own? And would we need customer feedback that we do not yet have? If the answer is yes, buying may be rational even at a premium. But the buyer has to verify that the model is genuinely differentiated. If the so-called AI capability is simply a API call to a third-party foundation model with a nice interface, the buyer is not acquiring model leverage. It is acquiring dependency. And that distinction very much matters. Then there's vector three, platform and network economics. This is where AI makes platform logic more powerful. Some businesses become more valuable as more users, customers, devices, transactions, or workflows pass through them. Why is that? Because the activity creates data. The data improves analytics, personalization, risk scoring, automation, prediction, or decisioning. That improvement makes the platform much more useful. And that usefulness attracts more activity. And this is the feedback loop. For corporate development, the question is this: does the target sit in a position where more usage creates more intelligence? If the answer is yes, the target may be worth more inside the acquirer's ecosystem than it is as a standalone business. But again, the buyer has to test the mechanism. It's not enough to say network effects. The deal thesis has to explain how usage becomes data, how data becomes model improvement, how model improvement becomes customer value, and how customer value becomes financial return. If that chain is not clear, the thesis is not mature. Then there's vector 4, AI enabled distribution. This is where AI improves reach, conversion, retention, personalization, customer service, or workflow engagement inside an existing distribution channel. The target may have a capability that becomes far more valuable when deployed across the acquirer's customer base. In older M&A language, this might sound like cross-sell, but AI-enabled distribution is very different. It's not just we will sell their product to our customers. It is we will embed their capability into our workflow, our data environment, our customer journeys, and our decision architecture. That means the value depends heavily on integration quality. Can the capability be embedded? Will customers adopt it? Will employees use it? Will it improve the economics of the existing platform? Will it create measurable revenue, retention, margin, or productivity lift? This is where corporate development has to work closely with product, data, operations, and commercial leaders. The deal model cannot cannot assume distribution without adoption. And then there's vector 5, AI category capture. This is the most strategic and often the most aggressive move. The buyer is not only acquiring a capability, it's trying to secure the default AI layer in a very specific vertical. Legal, healthcare, insurance, banking, industrial design, customer service, cybersecurity, tax, compliance, clinical operations. In these domains, the winner may not be the company with the best generic model. It may be the company with the best combination of domain data, workflow integration, trust, regulatory readiness, distribution, and professional adoption. Vertical AI category capture asks, can this target help us become the default intelligence layer in a domain before the market structure hardens? That's an arbitrage. That is not a simple product acquisition. That is a category shaping bet. And corporate development has to underwrite it that way. At this point, we should evaluate a practical tool. And this is where I would like to introduce you to the Deal Thesis Diagnostic tool. When evaluating an AI enabled target, we should ask 5 questions. Question number 1, what data compounds? What data does the target own, control, generate, or access? Does the data improve with usage? Can it be legally used for AI? Does it refresh? Does it carry proprietary context? Can it be connected to economic decisions? Question 2, what model improves? Is there a model or AI capability that gets better over time? Is the performance measurable? Is there a real evaluation framework? Is the model proprietary, fine tuned, domain specific, or is it merely wrapped around a third party provider? Question number three: what workflow changes? Where does the AI actually enter the business? Does it change underwriting, pricing, claims, servicing, sales, compliance, product development, customer support, or even engineering? Is the workflow redesigned or is AI just sitting beside the process? Question number four: what governance travels? What legal, regulatory, privacy, cyber, model risk, data rights, or customer trust obligations come with the target? Can the acquirer govern the asset after close? Will the target's governance posture accelerate deployment or slow it down? Question number five: what value is captured after close? What must be true in the first 30, 100, and 365 days for the premium to become real? Who owns the value? What telemetry proves it? And what adoption has to happen? What can go wrong? If the deal thesis cannot answer those five questions, it is not yet an AI era deal thesis. It is a story. And stories are not enough when capital is being deployed at a premium. Now, let's widen the strategic choice set. The old question was often framed as build versus buy. That is too narrow. In the AI era, corporate development should think across at least six options. First, we have build. Second, buy. Then we think about partner. Fourth, we think about invest, and then joint venture, and then acqui-hire. Each option really has a different relationship to ownership, control, speed, risk, capital intensity, talent, governance, and optionality. You build when the capability is core, proprietary, highly strategic, and deeply tied to your own data. But be honest about internal execution. Can you recruit the talent? Can you access the data? Can you afford the compute? Can you get past the pilot stage? And, can you move quickly enough? Building creates a level of control, but it can also be slow. You buy when the target compresses time, brings proprietary data, provides scarce talent, or secures a strategic control point that would be difficult to replicate. Buying creates a level of speed and control, but it introduces integration and valuation risk. Then we think about partner. You partner when you need capability or access, but full ownership is unnecessary or perhaps just too risky. Partnerships can be powerful when the market is moving quickly and antitrust or integration complexity makes acquisition just entirely unattractive. But partnerships require governance, data sharing, intellectual property rights, customer ownership, economics, exit rights, and operating responsibilities have to be structured very carefully. Then we think about invest. You invest when you want exposure, influence, optionality, or learning without full control. Strategic investments can help a company monetary category, shape a relationship, or even position itself for a later transaction. But minority investments, they can also create ambiguity because you have to ask, what rights do you have? What information do you receive? What influence do you actually control as a minority investor? Then we think about joint venture. A joint venture makes sense when perhaps two or more parties bring complementary assets. One party may bring data, another party may bring distribution, and yet another may bring technology. Another may bring regulatory position. And the question is whether the combined structure can create something that neither party could build alone. But joint ventures are difficult. They require clarity on governance, on economics, contribution value, decision rights, exit terms, and dispute resolution. In the AI era, joint ventures may become more important because data, distribution, and capability are often held by different parties. And finally, acqui-hire. In some AI deals, the target isn't the revenue, it's the team. The buyer wants the researchers, the engineers, the applied AI leaders, or the product builders. But acqui-hires also come with risk. Will the team stay? Can they work inside the acquirer's ecosystem or culture? Are the incentives aligned? Does the structure invite regulatory scrutiny? And yet, does the buyer get the capability or just the resumes? And so the broader point is this: corporate development is no longer only choosing between build and buy, it is designing the right architecture of access, control, speed, governance, and value capture. That is a much higher order function. So, what does this mean for the corporate development function? It means that corporate development must become more cross-functional, more technical, more operating aware, and more governance aware. Not because corporate development should replace your product or your data team or your legal team or security or HR or even the integration teams. It shouldn't. But corporate development has to orchestrate the deal logic across those domains. In a traditional transaction, the deal team could hand off many issues after close. In an AI enabled transaction, that handoff can destroy value very quickly. The data architecture should influence the deal thesis. The governance posture should influence valuation. The talent risk should influence deal structure. The integration model should influence whether the deal is even worth doing. The post close value metrics should be defined well before close. That is the core change. Corporate development becomes the connective tissue between the capital allocation and operating value. Let's close session one with the central idea. In AI era transactions, the buyer is not always buying a company in the traditional sense. It may be buying a data asset, a model capability, a workflow position, a talent cluster, a governance layer, a platform control point, a customer feedback loop, even, or a future operating system. Until the buyer can name what it is really buying, the valuation model is not enough. In session two, we will move from thesis to underwriting. We will ask, how does corporate development verify the AI story? How does it diligence data, models, governance, compute, uh, cyber, intellectual property, talent, customers, and vendors, even? And How do those findings move into pricing, terms, and risk architecture? Because the thesis is only useful if it becomes underwriting discipline.